Letitia Dorman, the daughter of a duke, lived an easygoing life at her countryside estate with her family, until one day, her family received an official letter from the palace. Her mother was overjoyed, delivering what she believed was wonderful news to Letitia, that her future had been decided. Her father explained that she was going to the castle to learn how to be a good wife, and when she learned she'd be without her dog or either of her parents, her eyes welled up. She cried into her father's arms as he consoled her. The only one that would be going with her was her big brother, Nadir, riding along the way. Even with him, though, her heart was still aching. They rolled through the capital, and arriving at the castle, Nadir had to awaken her. And to Letitia, the castle was huge and intimidating. The castle featured artworks of the royalty and housed nobles that constantly gossiped. Letitia eventually found herself getting shoved into a room, where she was met with her princess teacher, Lila Mayer, who would be her strict instructor in the art of etiquette. Letitia needed to learn how to speak clearly and give a proper greeting to start, all while maintaining the correct posture. Their first lesson was to greet, stating her full title as the daughter of Duke Dorman, but with her stammering and natural laxness, Lila had her repeat, making her cry. And yet, this crying would not change a thing. At night, she was still crying into her pillow. She hated when scary people yelled at her. She wanted to go home. However, her big brother was objective, explaining that even if she tried to run, they'd be more strict with her. So, she accepted. And when she did, her brother called in her new attendant, Lily, and she would be thus forward, helping Letitia review for her lessons with Lila. Lily would wake up this slovenly sleeping princess-to-be every morning. Letitia was taught to relax her shoulders, tighten her stomach gracefully, and look straight ahead as if gazing far away, and walk with a book on her head in order to maintain her proper posture while walking. Her failures would bring her to tears, but even so, she would continue over and over. She'd gradually begin to wake up less sloppily, learn how to properly eat with grace, and dance while falling over. But still, her instructor would urge her on. Time would go on. The seasons would change. One morning, Lily did not wake her up, and instead found her ready and staring out at the window ahead of the usual time. Letitia developed grace in a manner akin to her spirit breaking, as she calmly spoke, "Good morning, Lily. It seems like fine weather again. I hope we can look forward to a pleasant day." Without an ounce of emotion. Letitia had become so good, Lila began using her to model for other students to learn. Her greetings held beauty and grace. Her eating was both quaint and elegant. The knowledge and understanding she had during her studies even impressed Lila. Letitia's dancing was flawless, but emotionless. Even pleasantries like tea time were part of the monotonous day-to-day that she wanted to escape from. Stepping into a social event, the people spoke of Letitia's loveliness, almost turning 17 soon. They believed it only made sense she was getting married to Prince Clark. When she reached the floor, though, everyone was surprised to see the prince had another woman on his arms named Brianna. He could not accompany Letitia today, and he apologized. And now, learning that their engagement was called off, Letitia backed away shaking, but it wasn't out of sadness. She let out a big hooray, an even bigger surprise than the prince presenting another woman. She was overjoyed the engagement was off. We turned back time to when meeting with her big brother one-on-one. She had him promise if the prince fell in love with someone else, he signed official dissolution to her engagement to the prince. She was now heaving for him to hold his promise, and so he agreed. Now all she could shout about was how free she was. She ran up to Brianna to thank her for taking this bad debt off her hands. She recounted her days studying etiquette, just walking perfectly all the time. She had really hated it. Sitting, standing, bowing, nibbling on dainty little meals, studying history, studying politics, studying economics, dancing, drinking bellyfuls of tea, and enduring constant bullying from the nobles calling her a filthy country tramp. Letitia couldn't take off soon enough. Reaching the exit, the prince called for her, but she just interjected by thanking him, telling him she couldn't be happier and wished he'd have broken off their engagement sooner. She declared she'd be moving far away, and that he could feel free to be with whomever and sire as many offspring as he wanted to bring prosperity to this kingdom. Stepping outside, she called for a carriage to be taken away, while everyone stared aghast. To this, the prince just smiled though. Back where she had been staying, she informed Lily they'd be moving because of what had happened, something the attendant could hardly believe. But still, Letitia was joyous, reiterating how she'd been suffering since she was 7, how every little thing she's done has been criticized. Don't laugh so loud, you'll bother someone. Who'd be bothered by laughter? She hated being told she couldn't run because it was unladylike, but now at last, she's been freed of it all. The deer then arrived, aggravated, and now suggested they move to Alberta Village, back to their country home. Letitia was happy to return to the countryside where there were rivers and forests, knowing it was a much humbler life than here at the palace. She asked if Lily wanted to come, and now Letitia was even happier hearing Lily would go anywhere with her. Back at the castle, Catherine and Isabella were discussing that with Lady Letitia gone, it was like all light had been drained from this place. Catherine thought Prince Clark and Letitia made the perfect couple. However, Isabella reminded Catherine he had Lady Brianna now. Then suddenly, Butler Sebastian came running to them, letting them know the Queen had requested they explain to her what happened at the ball. Adding to that, they suddenly heard Brianna scream, who was in the midst of princess lessons. She could in no way continue on with the strictest princess instructor, Lila. Back in the countryside, Letty was enjoying the nice weather while lying on the beautiful grass, rolling around. She was happy to be free forever, while Lily peacefully continued her sewing. After getting ready, she took off for the day, deciding to go out for a fun day of fishing. After casting her line, she jolted, hearing a man whisper to her, "Looks like you're having fun." She nearly fell over, but Prince Clark saved her fall while her caught fish came flying over. She definitely wasn't expecting to see him though, and now wondered what his deal was. Post-cooking her fish by the fire, she enjoyed its flavor, but questioned why the prince was just watching her. He was curious as to why she had returned the fish she had just caught. So she explained when she caught fish that were too young, she released them. She didn't mean to be greedy, she only wanted enough to enjoy. The prince was taken aback by her words. She offered him some, and he pulled back, despite her warnings that it would be hot. But eating it, he was surprised. He never knew freshly grilled fish could be so delicious and questioned why meals at the castle had always been served cold. But throughout their entire time here together, all Letty could think about was what the prince's aim was. She brought back some fish to show off to folks at the town square. The folks were always impressed by the hooks she made herself, given they'd always attract several fish with ease. This worried Prince Clark, as he pointed out the hooks could hurt her hands. It was clear he didn't understand what life in the countryside was like. The people loved Lady Letitia, be it old ladies, children, pets, anyone and everyone really. As she played with the kids, one of the shop owners told Clark about how lively the village has been since her return, and how even though she may be a noblewoman, she always treated them without even a hint of prejudice. Everyone in town simply adored her. The prince can now see that taking her would be the same as stealing her from everyone. But now petting the dog, pleading at him, he assured the dog he'd do anything to make Letitia happy. Walking back with Letitia to her place, he offered to help carry her stuff, but she refused. She'd never let anyone touch her precious fishing gear. She was never cut out to be a princess to begin with. She's always loved running around, climbing trees, and fishing. She liked the outdoors more than fashion, and was a natural loudmouth. Nothing in the world made her happier than being out in nature like this. The prince suddenly made a stop to point out the farm animals, and we learned they belonged to Letty's family. Seeing a horse come up, she gave it a nice pet, and now seeing him caress the horse, she was blown away. She had never paid any attention to him before, but now, as he stood amongst nature, she could see how handsome he really was. He was happy to have come out here, seeing multiple sides of her, be it her anger, seriousness, and even her smiling. His loving gaze made her blush, until he suddenly dropped the bomb that the two of them were still engaged. Before she could respond, though, he took off on horseback. Returning home, she told Lily they should elope, even bringing up how love transcended gender. However, Lily sarcastically responded there was no kind of love between them, then proceeded to inform her that her big brother was visiting. Letty ran frantically to her brother, who was calmly reeing. She wanted to know why she was still engaged to the prince, so he told her to think carefully. Not once during their interaction at the ball did Prince Clark ever actually say a single thing about wanting an annulment. Recalling it all, She realized he was right. She couldn't believe this. She asked about Brianna, who had been standing beside the prince. So, the deer answered that the prince was just trying to make her jealous. Clark seemed to take great pleasure in watching Letty's enthusiastic reactions. Brianna had enough of this bantering, though. She was begging for Letty to come back, as she had been stuck taking princess lessons ever since she left. Letty was unsure why Brianna wanted her to come back, but Brianna sharply responded she wasn't interested in a prince who was head over heels for another woman. However, the worst part of it all for Brianna was Lila. The strictness was killing her. On top of that, the prince officially declared he'd only produce heirs with Letty. Letty screamed back, red-faced upon hearing that. Then, a knock at the door. Letty and Nadir's parents were calling for her, and going over, Letty got a swift knock from her mother, telling her she wasn't here just because she missed her. Duchess Dorman wanted to know what happened back at the castle. The Duchess even interrupted her husband, who wanted to try to have a loving reunion, as their daughter's future was at stake here. This was all too much for Letty, so she got dressed that night and prepared to escape. Exiting the door, her cape was unfortunately caught by Brianna, who had no plans on letting Letty escape, because if she didn't bring Letty back, she'd be stuck with princess lessons. However, Letty offered her older brother, the male heir to a duchy who was 22, intelligent, athletic and tall. That was enough for Brianna to let Letty go, and so Letty told Brianna her brother's favorite boot and took off, unbeknownst to the fact that he had witnessed the entire event. Letty was happy to be free again, but not expecting Prince Clark to be here to catch her. He wanted to talk about wedding dress colors. But this wasn't a really good time for her. Queen Laura quickly walked through the halls, startling Sebastian with her questions. He learned Prince Clark would be returning home tomorrow, and that she particularly liked Letitia. Back at the countryside mansion, Letitia was struggling in Clark's arms, who wouldn't let her go, knowing she tried to run off again. So she gave up. With Nadir answering, she reminded him about his promise. However, he just ignored her, letting the prince know things would be proceeding as planned. Letty's parents were laughing over the matter, and Lily melted a wish of happiness to the future king and queen. If Letty had known this was going to be the result, she would have worked out a lot harder to escape. Riding back via carriage, the prince asked Letty if she hated him for taking her away like this. And she didn't. The prince was almost joyful, until hearing she didn't like him either. However, the thing he was most curious about was if she at least started taking interest in him as a man. Really though, she never put any thought into that even once. Sitting beside her, he grabbed her hands, causing her to shriek and flail. He was delighted they finally had a chance to talk to each other. However, he was just a little too close now. He wanted to see her face up close. And remembering Brianna telling her Clark only wanted to produce heirs with her, she shoved the prince off, heaving, then saying to him that was enough. But this only made him laugh. Realizing what she had done, she apologized, but he thought nothing of it, instead deciding to rest on her shoulder, knowing their trip would be a long way back. She screamed there was no way she could sleep like this, which was totally false, by the way, considering the prince woke her up upon arrival back at the castle, showing her the open pasture he had made containing horses and a small creek. She was amazed. He knew she'd like it. She could even go fishing here. When they got married, he wanted her to be able to be free to do as she pleased. He believed she was a proper lady now, and thought it was fine they ended her princess lessons. Clark got permission from his father, the king, when he told his father he'd never marry anyone besides her, and he'd have kids with nobody else. Now getting on one knee, he asked her to marry him, but no matter what reason he used, she denied this. She didn't want to marry into the royal family, so unfortunately, the prince resorted to locking her into a room, where she couldn't open the door or windows. She was tired though, so she decided to rest. She dreamt she was reeling in a big one, and on her fishing line was the prince. In this nightmare, she ended up in the town square, where she was swarmed by Prince Clarks who kept proposing to her. Then a sea monster Clark rose from the fountain behind her, telling her to hurry up and marry him. She woke up screaming and panting in tears from it all. Nothing a little breakfast wouldn't cure though. She was then treated to a bath, got her hair brushed, and given a lovely dress to wear, where she found her chance to push the maid aside because she really wanted her freedom. She escaped out a castle window, where she fell on her butt, getting found by the prince as usual. He took her hand, and picking her up once again, He wanted to impress upon her that there was absolutely no escape. Seeing her plan to live a free, tranquil life had failed once more, and when she was at her wits' end, they started feeding her exquisite meals and croissants. The bath was also warmed and smelled so good. Maria, the maid, was clearly good at buttering her up. Perfectly fine, despite the fact Letitia had shoved her down. Letitia then realized she and her were about the same age, same height, and had similar figures. Oh no. She started harassing the maid to swap clothes with her. Prince Clark suddenly entered, learning that Letty was trying to escape again. He just sighed, knowing she hadn't accepted his feelings for her yet. So his plan was to now elucidate how he felt about her, slowly and thoroughly. He just sat her down to try to talk like close friends. But by the end of the night, she was totally exhausted. She thought back to his sweet words, telling her that her skin radiated like the glow of a pure white lily blossom. Her blushing cheeks were like fresh roses that illuminated with color. He had thrown out so many sweet comparisons for her. She was now kicking her feet on the bed. Still though, she felt it wasn't right for her to be locked up, without even having her feelings considered. That night, being left alone, Letty made an attempt to escape by smashing the window, joyously skipping before being caught by that prince again. He twirled her in close, asking if she preferred a necklace of diamonds or pearls for her wedding dress. Looks like she's not getting away. Subscribe.